This is Head On Shaw TV. I'm your host, Ian Holmes, examining issues of significance across mid-Vancouver Island. And in late March, a pretty significant announcement with a pretty big land transfer of Crown land from the province going over to Snuneymuxw First Nation, 880 hectares or 2,100 acres, if you will, of this land going to Snuneymuxw First Nation, most of it in the Mount Benson area. This is all about economic generation for the Snuneymuxw First Nation, a little more landmass for Snuneymuxw, which has a relatively small amount of land. And there on your screen is a picture of Snuneymuxw Chief Doug White, along with Ida Chong, the Minister of Reconciliation and Aboriginal Relations, signing that deal. And with me now is Doug White, Chief of Snuneymuxw First Nation. Doug, thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me here.
It really was a big moment back in late March, that news conference down at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. What is the value? What does this really mean for the Snuneymuxw people, Doug?
This is really, Ian, this is a transformative opportunity for the Snuneymuxw First Nation. As you pointed out, the Snuneymuxw have very little land. We're one of the biggest First Nations in the province by population, with just under 2,000 members. But for many, many years, we've been stuck on 267 acres or hectares of reserve land in the Nanaimo area, big chunks of which go under water every winter up on the Nanaimo River. It's been a very challenging situation for us for over 100 years now. We've known that we need more land to not just for a place to live, but a place to build an economy upon, public spaces. We have all kinds of needs, and as a people, up until now, we've not even been able to meet the first need of a people to a land base, which is somewhere to live. So it's been a great challenge, and over the last few years, we've made a concerted effort to find ways to create the opportunity for a transformative change for our people. This reconciliation agreement, the land that's coming over, really represents a very significant opportunity. It quadruples the land base of this Nanaimo First Nation. The land is fee simple land, it won't be reserved land, but the largest portion of it is up in the mountains, forest land around south slopes of Mount Benson, down towards the Nanaimo River. Some of the very few little areas of Crown land that are left in our territory. Most of our territory was handed over to the Dunsmuir family in the 1880s for them to build the railway system. So it's created a lot of difficulties for the Snuneymuxw, that fact that there's no Crown land in our territory. This little area of land is one part of that has been there. The province, in terms of us sitting down and talking about giving recognition that the patterns of behavior and engagement are broken and that we need to come up with new ways of working together. Part of the discussion with the province over the past year aimed at achieving this reconciliation agreement is, let's get some economic tools in the hands of Snuneymuxw that won't just be a benefit to Snuneymuxw, but are going to be a benefit to the region as a whole. As we develop these lands, and we're going to be depending upon and needing businesses, local businesses, forestry companies to help us. So it's going to be beneficial to Snuneymuxw in a very large way, and I think it's going to be important to the region as well.
And a lot of that is the forestry activity that you'll be looking to do in the Mount Benson area. That's where the economic generation aspect comes in, Doug. So just clarify a little bit about what that means. The southern slopes of Mount Benson, and it's about 2,100 acres, is that right? It's most of this land transfer is essentially that Mount Benson chunk, right?
Yeah, there's two, the Mount Benson lands are just under 2,200 acres of land. And then there's a small piece of Departure Bay, just over 1 acre of Departure Bay, right in the old village site of the Snuneymuxw, Slaylup it's called, the real home of the Snuneymuxw that we were pushed out of in the 1860s. That little piece of it is coming back to us, but by far the real economic development piece for us is the forestry land. So from one side to the other, it's about 5.4 kilometers. It's a very significant piece of land, very solid second or third growth timber there. And so it's a good opportunity for our people. Okay,
so what kind of activity? Logging, obviously, but just to what scale and what area of the mountain does Snuneymuxw hope to log there, Doug?
Well, that's the kind of planning that we're going to be engaged in. The land will transfer to us sometime this summer, and at that we're going to be gearing up in a very significant way to do all of the planning that's required to put all of those plans in place. We want to make sure that we're doing this a good way. It's not, while it's a big piece of land comparatively to us, in terms of forestry activity, it's not a year-round operation, so we're going to have to work to try and find ways to work with other entities in the region to see what kind of partnerships we can come up with to make this an ongoing year-round project.
And in terms of development, is that part of what you have planned there with the logging once it's cleared, or is it strictly just from the economic generation from the fiber out of there, Doug?
I think it's primary. I mean, at this point, we see it as primarily being a forestry activity-focused project. Certainly there's the road, South Forks Road, that goes right through the middle of it. There are different areas of that where there's people that live currently, not on the land that's coming to us, but if you go further down towards the Nanaimo River, then there's a number of homes down that way. So certainly it's not far-fetched to think that maybe some of this land may be developable over the course of time.
And when do you hope that to get going, Doug?
I would imagine this would be over the course of decades, not any time in the near number of years.
Okay. You touched on that Departure Bay site, very significant site for the Snuneymuxw people, and just talk about that significance. It's a small piece of property, but a burial grounds, as several years ago, a long list, dozens, I don't know exactly how many remains of Snuneymuxw people were found in that site, not far from the 7-Eleven. So that's obviously very important to the Snuneymuxw people, right, Doug?
It's a very critical piece of our territory. When we think about the real home of the Nanaimo people, we think about Departure Bay and that old village site there. It was a village site where, when you look at the old pictures from the mid-19th century, that there's multiple rows of lawn houses, at least 3 deep, all along the front of Departure Bay there. And in 1854, that land was recognized as our Aboriginal title lands in the agreement that we had with James Douglas, the Douglas Treaty. Unfortunately, over the course of the next decade, those lands we were pushed out of those lands. Obviously, we were pushed out of that winter village site, and we were pushed out of the other winter village site was in the Nanaimo Harbor, called Wasalahwil. And so in 1864, there's a record of Snuneymuxw chiefs going to advocate with the 3rd governor of the colony of Vancouver Island. This was before Canada existed. 10 years after the treaty was signed, going to Governor Kennedy and saying, we want you to live up to the agreement between the Snuneymuxw people and the Crown. Our village sites were meant to be protected and kept by us in this arrangement. And that wasn't honored, and so we were already advocating, before Canada even existed as a country, to ensure that the Crown was living up to their end of the deal. Over the course of the last 160 years, that hasn't been true. Up until now, in March 27th, the provincial government made clear that they were going to be transferring that land that had been identified a number of years ago now as a critical area. There was a developer that was seeking to develop, and as you mentioned, I think it was about 80 sets of remains of Snuneymuxw ancestors were uncovered. The work was stopped, but the land was never transferred. So we used this mechanism of the reconciliation agreement to finally do the land transfer. And so it means a lot to our people to get a little piece of our home back. Our elders and our people are very happy. And
what will happen with that land? Not a big site, but will there be some kind of a cultural interpretive center? What does Snuneymuxw have planned for that little chunk there in Departure Bay? Well, right now the only potential project is something like a cultural interpretive center, something that would be very low impact, but something that we could start to reopen the land for different uses other than, I think the province has had it fenced off for a number of years now. And I know that, I've seen over the time that I've been chief for the last 3 years, people expressing in the local media that they're upset about, why we've given this land back to the Nanaimo and it's just been left, it's been fenced up and weeds are growing and they're not looking after it. It's important for everyone to know that the land is still not under our control. It still remains with the province. And when it's transferred to us this summer, we're going to be seeking to make it more accessible and more available. So, and one thing for sure is, to build a small cultural center of some kind in a lawn house type structure is one idea. But it's not certain yet, but certainly something along those lines, as you've suggested, is what's on our mind about Departure Bay right now. Another aspect that got buried a little bit with this reconciliation deal was the future use and management of the Nanaimo River Estuary, and more of a say for Snuneymuxw in terms of what happens in that area, which is very significant to the Snuneymuxw people. We've talked numerous times, Doug, over the past few years about your disappointment with the way that area has been abused over the years. So what's this aspect of the reconciliation deal intended to do? Well, the Nanaimo River Estuary is an absolutely critical dimension of our territory. It's, it's a really important part of our traditional economy, of our fisheries. And for 100 years now, it's been treated as an industrial zone for industry of different kinds. So it had a massive impact on the fisheries values for us. An important part of that is the provincial crown entering into a head lease with the federal Nanaimo Port Authority for areas of the estuary, and then the Port Authority in turn subleasing those areas to forestry companies for log booming. And some years ago we made clear that that's not acceptable, that we need to find a different way of using this area, starting to take steps to remediate the damage that's been done,
and to show some respect and regard for the Snuneymuxw values of the estuary as a whole. And through this agreement, this reconciliation agreement with the Crown, we've gotten to a place where they've agreed that we need to, like the existing understanding that was in place wasn't serving the interests or the needs of Snuneymuxw, that by and large everything was continuing on as it always had, that meaningful steps weren't being taken to address Snuneymuxw's concerns. And so through this agreement, we're going to be addressing the estuary in a very important and significant way.
So does Snuneymuxw take the lead on that? Obviously, there's other parties involved, like so many stakeholders in that area. But so do you lead the charge in terms of what the future uses of the Nanaimo Estuary, which is a pretty big area, on how that looks for the future, Doug?
It's definitely, it's our position and our view that nothing will happen in that estuary without Snuneymuxw consent. We've got significant legal rights to that estuary as a part of a critical component of our fishery. We're open to the idea, we've been expressing this for a number of years, we're open to the idea of recognizing how important it is to industry in terms of the log booming and the jobs that supports. What we want to do is we want to sit down with the province and talk about these issues. We want to engage with industry and talk about their interests and their needs, and figure out how can we come to an agreement about a plan, a long-term plan for reducing log booming in the estuary in an orderly way, and restoring different elements of the estuary that have been damaged over the years.
Okay. It's unrelated to the reconciliation deal, but in terms of relations with the province, the goal towards getting a treaty signed for the Snuneymuxw people continues. I think the process started about 19 years ago, 1994, continues to this day. Is there any update on that aspect of things, Doug? What's new on that side?
Well, unfortunately there's nothing much new there. And what's the Nanaimo First Nation was one of the lead First Nations that helped to create the treaty process a generation ago. We had very clear expectations in that process that it would be one where we'd be able to engage with the Crown to talk about how the Aboriginal rights, the Aboriginal titles, and the treaty rights of the Nanaimo people would be able to be implemented and utilized by us, and in a way where we negotiate to provide certainty to all of the people concerned. So the provincial Crown, federal Crown, Nanaimo, work out these understandings and arrangements in recognition and respect as a meaningful step towards reconciliation. About a decade ago, it became clear, it became clear much longer than this, that the federal and provincial Crowns were not arriving at the table with the sufficient mandates, that they were impoverished mandates, that their vision for the future was really inconsistent with what our people were trying to achieve on a number of different issues. One of the most critical for us was the fact that they wanted to effectively put aside the Douglas Treaty. The existing treaty that we have from 1854, they just wanted that to be rolled into the modern treaty, which is a model that didn't work for us. The only participation we've had in the treaty process over the last number of years is to seek to engage with the federal and provincial Crowns to talk about and explore Douglas Treaty implementation with them. Is there a way for them to understand why that's important to the Nanaimo people, and how can that unfold over the course of time? And so the reconciliation agreement, while it's really important for everyone to know that it's not part of the treaty process, it's not in any way associated with the treaty process. What it is it's an economic agreement between Nanaimo and the Crown that is not just about economic consideration coming over to Nanaimo, but importantly, there's the engagement protocol that is meant for us to put in place a structure of making decisions between Nanaimo and the Crown about activities taking place in Nanaimo territory. One of the things that's been problematic is the lack of regard for the Douglas Treaty rights of my people. Since I've showed up, I've made it clear that that's a critical dimension of the future here, that the status quo is broken and insufficient, and we need to get on a new path. This is where the reconciliation agreement was born out of, is this idea. So there's the engagement protocol that's an important part of taking steps towards implementation of Douglas Treaty rights and a Douglas Treaty framework for making decisions. And in terms of the economic consideration, it's a way for getting Nanaimo more involved in the economy.
Doug, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate the overview to see what Snuneymuxw has planned with this reconciliation deal. Work continues on the treaty process, which is coming along. It's obviously not going very fast, but these things take time. I really appreciate the insight from a Snuneymuxw perspective. Thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time and attention to this important matter. I appreciate it.
That's Doug White, the chief of Snuneymuxw First Nation, providing some solid insight here on this reconciliation deal signed between the province and Snuneymuxw. Thanks so much. That's another edition of Head On Shaw TV. I'm Ian Holmes. Tune in next time. A fresh episode coming up on the issues that really matter on Mid-Vancouver Island. Thanks for tuning in.